Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, and your chancellor of cheerfulness, and lest we not forget, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, once again robcasting at you from this, a very discombobulated Robservatory. There's things happening here. Things are moving. It's going to be a whole new Robservatory shortly. It's good to be here today with you, the day before Father's Day, on a Saturday. Hey, are you all going to be in Tulsa, Oklahoma tonight? I am not going to be, but for those that are, I hope you all have a good and most of all safe time. I'm sure it's going to be enjoyable. Before we get to today's topic, I get to discuss an ongoing, I don't know what we should call it. I think I should start, maybe have a subtitle like they have on 24-Hour News, some kind of a thing about Quibi. Like I should make myself some kind of a dun 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 dun, maybe a little theme song and a little Quibi graphic whenever I talk about Quibi. The great Quibi misfire of 2020. I have to come up with some catchy catchphrase. Maybe I'll throw that out to you. Why don't you all come up with some catchy, quippy, Quibi catchphrase that I can use? I can't get enough. I can't get enough of watching Quibi, and I don't know where it's going to go, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere good. Maybe it will. Maybe they'll pull one out. It'll be one of the great comeback stories of all time in the entertainment business. I don't think so. And there was some Quibi news, Quibi articles this week that I was remiss that I didn't bring you. And I'm going to alleviate that situation right now. And we're going to jump right into discussing Quibi. And the first thing that we're going to talk about, allow me to put on these glasses, these $5 Amazon reading glasses. I know they're not, look, man, they're not Tom Ford glasses. If I could, the next time I order my bottle of Tom Ford Black Orchid cologne, I will order Tom Ford frames. They're probably much more expensive, and I'd have to probably get my eyes checked or something like that. But these just help me read. I don't think they're very fashionable, nor am I trying to make a fashion statement. So for those of you who say they do nothing for my features, I'm right there with you. But, what can I tell you? So let's just jump into Jeffrey Katzenberg. This was, of course, June 18th. June 18th. I can't believe I missed it. On Deadline, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Quibi hit COVID-19 cement wall, but slow start is like a beta, allowing a chance to regroup. All right, Jeff, whatever you say. Let's see what Jeff had to say. Quibi founder Jeffrey Katzenberg says the slow start of the mobile streaming service since its April 6th launch has provided almost a beta period that gives the well-funded startup a chance to regroup. In an online video conversation with Liberty Gold's CEO Mike Fries, hosted Thursday by Series Fest, Katzenberg maintained Quibi is poised for a rebound in the second half of 2020 as states reopen more fully. Why is that, Jeff? Are you going to have a reconceptualization of the entire Quibi format? Or do you think that now that people are walking around, they're going to discover your scintillating programming? Commuting and other time viewers will be spending outside their homes is apt to increase, he said. Plus, more people will be waiting online across the country for things like haircuts and dry cleaning. Because when I'm waiting for a haircut or I'm waiting to pick up my dry cleaning, the first thing I think about is tuning into Quibi and catching up with one of their daily shows. Quibi has thus far drawn just 4.5 million app downloads and 1.6 million subscribers, well short of initial targets. COVID-19 and the resulting shutdowns nullified the premise of the offering and became a little bit of a cement wall that we ran into upon launch on April 6th. I don't understand, Jeff. I don't understand. You launch a streaming service for phones and somehow people staying at home, wouldn't that have been a benefit? Wouldn't people have had not much more to do than tune in? Oh, wait, you didn't make your system, Quibi was not available on anything other than phones. Like you couldn't watch it on, you couldn't stream it. Anyway, But I'm quite optimistic, says Jeff, that this this use case is going to work. People are loving this. Yeah, the people that subscribed already. Mobile viewing on TikTok, Snapchat, and YouTube has been comparatively healthy during COVID-19, but Quibi's programming is more ambitious, with pedigreed contributors and generally higher production values. After raising $1.7 billion in financing and spending heavily on promotion, Quibi has undershot the expectations of investors, content partners, and advertisers. Like a lot of companies, it has set executive pay cuts of 10%, but has added staff and says it is in sound financial shape. Really? And not planning layoffs, contrary to some media reports in recent weeks. The silver lining of the sluggish start, Katzenberg said, is that it's actually given us the opportunity to have almost a beta. In 9 weeks, we've actually now seen so many aspects of the content about what is working for them, what is most appealing to them, where our weaknesses are. I think the entire conception of Quibi was your weakness. All of that is being retooled as we talk here right now. We're leaning in twice as hard on things that are working the best and leaning away from things that are not. In July, the country will enter a new phase after the dark days of spring quarantine, Katzenberg noted, while he said elsewhere in the session that entertainment overall would not fully recover until a coronavirus vaccine is released in the first part of 2021 at the earliest. Activity will increase in the meantime. We are all going to be back on the go again. The difference is we're all going to be waiting online for more things than we ever have before. He mentioned haircuts, restaurants, dry cleaning, and other re-emerging sectors. I hope Quibi is going to be there to fill in those in-between moments. Okay. I'm sorry. You know what? I'm here. I'm not even a reporter. I'm an editorializer. You're getting my Robservations on Quibi just by how I read this article. There are now 75 shows on Quibi. Can I name one? Can you name one? Including daily offerings that were paused during the pandemic, Katzenberg said. Because Liberty Global is an investor in Quibi, a fact that Fries disclosed during the session, questions did not cover too much sensitive ground. Unaddressed topics include a legal copyright battle with Echo, relations between CEO Meg Whitman and Katzenberg, described as a struggle in a recent Wall Street Journal article, or the company's exploration of smart TV apps. Quibi is not a combatant in the streaming competition among new entrants like Disney+, HBO Max, and Peacock, which are trying to catch up with Netflix, Katzenberg said. They're competing for your time in a living room, he said. There are going to be some winners, but probably some big losers in that. Are there? By contrast, he argued, Quibi is in a white space. What a good thing for you to say, Jeff. I'll tell you, I never thought that Quibi was in a white space, but if you say it is... more power to you. And doesn't need primetime viewers, only people watching short-form video between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Really? What about at night? What about sitting on the toilet? I mean, I would, if I was promoting Quibi, I would say, never mind what I would say, but I think there's avenues of promotion you're not going for, Jeff. While Fries repeatedly voiced admiration for Quibi's programming and maintained enthusiasm for its chances, he also offered a fleeting glimpse of the restlessness amongst the startup's blue-chip backers. I'll say, Jeff, you've got some content that should be viral, he said, as Katzenberg nodded. We've got to find a way to get it viral, whether that's social media or whatever. Comedy series Kirby Jenner, Fries added, is hilarious and a viral piece of content that has yet to find its way out. Once found, people love it and watch it. Anyway, you've got the story. Boy, we sure do. Wow, okay. First of all, this content's viral. You can't say content should be viral, that's not. Viral content just happens. It's like setting out to make a sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, like, I don't know, Shock Treatment. You can't make a cult movie. A cult movie happens. It happens. If you set out to make a cult movie, you've already failed. Because a cult movie has to inspire a cult that rises up around it. I mean, if that's your desire, if you want to create another midnight movie, it doesn't work that way. You can't set out and go like, well, we're going to make some viral content here. Like, no. No. Content becomes viral because of something that's inherent in it that you can't necessarily set out to create. I mean, I guess you can. There's content that does go viral that I'm sure people know that it's going to go viral, but I don't think that, anyway, there was another article that came out from our friend Scott Mendelson, who can always be counted upon to deliver something that I want to talk about, whether it's in the pro category or the con category. The headline alone just makes me happy. And this was published on June 15th, and I'm sorry I missed it. But hey, what are Saturdays for than to catch up on those great entertainment stories you might have missed? So Scott Mendelson, take it away. Quibi, the fatal miscalculation that doomed Katzenberg and Whitman's streamer. And this is in Forbes. Just because consumers like watching Netflix on their phones doesn't mean the mere idea of watching content on their phone is exciting. The Wall Street Journal is reporting, among other things, that Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman's Quibi may fail to hit even 30% of its projected first-year subscribers goal, with a likely year-end total of under 2 million paying customers. There is a strong case to be made that the timing of when the watch bite-sized content on your phone streaming platform launched in the middle of a pandemic where everyone was stuck at home with plenty of time to watch movies or binge TV shows was a major factor in the current collapse of the service. However, even acknowledging that few folks are leaving the house and that an economic collapse has made the $5 per month service less appetizing alongside the more IP-driven likes of Disney Plus and HBO Now, it's possible that Quibi was always doomed. The platform offers entirely new content, dramatic shows, comedic shows, reality TV, and news bites, all offered in 5 to 10 minute segments intended to be watched while on a subway, in the bathroom, see, Scott gets it, or during a brief break from the activities of the day. Like Apple TV, which has also somewhat struggled over the last year, it was banking on star-driven and filmmaker-driven content sans a reliance on back catalog and nostalgic old favorites to spur initial interest. But to paraphrase Divergent, Scott, you crack me up, man. What made Quibi different may have also made it dangerous. Yes, it was interesting to see shows formatted for your phone to be viewed vertically or horizontally. First of all, okay, can I just editorialize here? Watching shows vertically sucks. I mean, you want to see things cinematically. It's horizontally. I mean, look, I love John Taylor and I love Duran Duran. And if you haven't watched John Taylor's new series on YouTube about bass guitar playing, it's really good. But the fact that he shoots it vertically drives me fucking insane. It's like, dude, Duran Duran was one of the most groundbreaking music video bands in the early 80s. You've done some incredible work. And look, to be fair, I understand why he's doing it. Because he wants to have full body shots of him playing and being able to show his whole body. So in that sense, I get it. I understand. But it's annoying. But I understand why he's doing it. Don't mean to put John Taylor down. Met him in a bookstore once. Very nice man. However, just because audiences liked watching content on their phone doesn't mean the very idea of watching content on a phone was itself a hook. The Anna Kendrick vehicle Dummy, about a young woman who strikes up a friendship with her boyfriend's sentient sex doll, is clever, charming, and entirely entertaining. The Most Dangerous Game, the service's big launch title, was an enjoyable 90-minute movie starring Liam Hemsworth as a terminally ill man partaking in a big city hunt in order to provide for his family. The show worked as intended as an exercise in bite-sized action, Hollywood production values, and constant paranoia. When the Streetlights Go On started strong but devolved into a big nothing where 80% of the storytelling is done via voiceover. Even the Will Forte-hosted Memory Hole, a documentary series about pop culture abominations, yes, Patton Oswalt dissects Jim Cotta. Kurt Thomas is a new kind of martial arts superhero, by the way, R.I.P. Kurt Thomas, who passed away a few weeks ago, is exactly what you might enjoy watching while you empty the dishes. As noted on launch day, the big problem was that the dramatic shows, and to a lesser extent the comedies, were paced for the binge, yet doled out one episode per day. I would have happily watched The Most Dangerous Game as a single movie in a single sitting, especially during a pandemic with no new movies arriving in the regular. Yet, I had to wait 2 weeks to get to the end. That's less of a problem now since folks who subscribe today can watch the Sophie Turner, Corey Hawkins plane crash drama Survive in its 12-part entirety. Dido Venus Sudd's surprisingly compelling The Stranger, a grim Makia Monroe, Dane DeHaan thriller about a young woman stalked by a homicidal rideshare customer. Offhand, The Stranger is the best of the dramas. But if and when new stuff shows up, you have to wait 2 weeks to get to the end. The issue isn't necessarily the quality of Quibi content, at least in terms of the stuff I personally found interesting enough to sample over the last 3 months. No, beyond any publicity being swallowed whole by politics, a pandemic, and a national protest for social change, the core idea behind Quibi may have been a misread of consumer interests. Simply put, audiences can and do watch their favorite shows and movies along with discovering new content on their phones because they can, not because the very idea of consuming content on their phone is itself a hook. Scott, you nailed it, sir. You nailed it. Quibi was based on the mere idea that watching a new show on your phone was inherently a draw. Exactly. Whoever thought of this in whatever brain trust or marketing department they came up with, and this idea that, oh, we're going to have content on the go just on your phone, was the fatal flaw of this. Today is the 30th anniversary of Dick Tracy, which was produced at Disney during Katzenberg's tenure and whose relative failure inspired Katzenberg's famous memo about studios betting on tentpoles at the expense of less risky singles and doubles. Yeah, that didn't turn out to be relevant at all. I adore the Warren Beatty-directed comic strip adaptation, finding it to be one of the more mature and adult comic book movies. It's about grown-ups who are miserable because they excel in fields that give them no pleasure, ever made. It was unfairly positioned as an answer to Tim Burton's Batman. The PG-rated, hyper-colorful, and stylistically violent, square-jawed good cop versus evil mobsters actioner grossed just $163 million on a $47 million budget, becoming the first movie to gross $100 million domestic and still be considered a disappointment. The irony is that Dick Tracy was just one of a handful of 1990s-era superhero disappointments that were fashioned like Burton's film noir pulp detective Batman flick, but stumbled due to audiences not caring about the characters of the cast. Just because audiences wanted a Batman movie doesn't mean they wanted the Shadow or the Phantom. And again, this is a really great point. And it's something that shows how Hollywood sometimes completely, and how the executive arms of the Hollywood studios completely have no understanding of anything. The idea that somebody in an executive boardroom would equate the Shadow or the Phantom with Batman in terms of their place in current pop culture history. This week was always also the 31st anniversary of Tim Burton's Batman, which was a monster hit when it came out. The anticipation was through the roof. And the idea that audiences of that day, of the 90s, had the same feelings about Batman and that they did about the Shadow and the Phantom. You know, I was a kid. I was very savvy in terms of pop culture. And let me tell you, even I knew that the Shadow and the Phantom were relegated to history. They were not a part of my life growing up. They were not a part of anybody's life growing up because they were heroes the days of yore. I mean, when Howard Chaykin brought the Shadow back to DC Comics, that was really cool, but they certainly didn't look to that comic when they decided to revitalize it. And this is when people, they don't understand that all things are not created equal, especially pop culture icons. Remember, you got to think 20 years before, and Batman was a constant. Batman was something kids know about, action figures, animated shows, but kids didn't know anything about the Shadow or the Phantom, so no one grew up with them. So of course they spent lavishly on these movies and they didn't work. We still see that today, where the success of Walt Disney's Beauty and the Beast means that audiences wanted Beauty and the Beast, not that they will thrill to any live-action adaptation of any Disney cartoon. That's why Dumbo bombed while Aladdin soared. It's why Batman Begins 15 years ago was a buzzy hit, but King Arthur, Robin Hood, and Pan were flops. And just because audiences thrilled to the Avengers didn't mean that they loved the mere idea of a cinematic universe. We saw the results of that fallacy in the failure of The Dark Tower and The Mummy, along with failed attempts to turn Transformers into an interconnected universe, and flawed attempts to remake Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man series and Warner Bros. DC film franchise in Marvel's image. Fans loved Marvel because they liked the MCU movies, specifically the MCU characters, not because the mere idea of superheroes on screen and the mere idea of an interconnected universe was inherently appealing. That's why DC and Marvel movies are generally big hits, but the likes of Hellboy and Bloodshot are not. Audiences enjoy watching Netflix on their phone because they like Netflix, not because they like watching content on their phone. That miscalculation is arguably most responsible for why Quibi has underperformed thus far. The pandemic and the protests, which caused a change in lifestyle and a decrease in marketing, didn't help. But the core idea of the service was flawed. The shows and reality content are fine, but none of it is buzzy. Not being able to share screenshots to social media is a big problem, albeit one that can be fixed down the line. And the mere idea of how content that you can only watch on your phone is not by itself exciting. It's not unlike Hollywood's presumption that the Avengers triumph because of an interconnected cinematic universe, as opposed to audiences really liking Marvel movies and treating the interconnectivity as a fun bonus amid well-made, well-liked, and mostly standalone superhero movies. Quibi's failure in the streaming wars may be a case of mistaking the seasoning for the main course. Hear, hear, sir. I couldn't have said it better myself. And again, what fascinates me about this so much is how do all of these very well-educated people that have been very successful not know this? I mean, I find it fascinating to watch, and I think it's really interesting the way Hollywood is always... Nobody gets successful in Hollywood following a trend, and yet so much of Hollywood is all about following trends, when no one really ever got monstrously successful doing that. And one of the things I've talked about on this show is when I was reading scripts, when I was a story analyst, when a movie would come out, successful films, say buddy cop movies or buddy friend movies, whether it was 48 Hours or Lethal Weapon or Midnight Run or Beverly Hills Cop or whatever. 6 months later, you would get a deluge of scripts that were variations on a theme. The joke was, it's Die Hard, but on a battleship. It's Die Hard, but on a jetliner. Until you get back to it's Die Hard in a building. And the trope runs its course. And this is the thing, I always... And they're never as good, because the idea is, ooh, this sells, so let's try and copy the formula so we can sell it again. You're already lost. You know, what you wanted to do is be first out of the gate. While, yes, 48 Hours and Beverly Hills Cop share Eddie Murphy, and they were very successful, but they weren't successful because necessarily of that buddy cop or buddy crime, buddy criminal, buddy cop, whatever it is, whatever your pairings of the two. It's because it's the films themselves and the people, the actors that are involved, the writers and the directors that are involved. It isn't the paradigm that is inherently something that's going to be obviously successful. That's part of it, but it is the meal and not the seasoning, or whatever, how Mr. Mendelsohn put it. So, look, I continue to watch Quibi with delight. Not because I revel. Look, there's a lot of people getting paid and making programming for Quibi, and it's always good to have places where you can go and sell your programming. I just think the inherent philosophy of what they were trying to do is so deeply flawed, and it so didn't work. And I don't see what they're going to have to do. What they're like, if I were them, I would just admit failure and dispense with the idea of the phones and watching things vertically and horizontally, and concentrate on making what everybody else is doing. Great content. Make great, breakthrough content that people love. That's how you get successful. That's how you get successful in entertainment. You know what you do? You make really good content that people love. Now, don't ask me, well, how do you do that, Rob? Because that's the magic formula, and I can't tell you what that is. I know what I would make. I know what I'm working on personally now. You know, if if you're asking me, now's the time to say, remember, you can watch a film I produced, The Hills Run Red, available this week, just out on Blu-ray for the very first time from Scream Factory, with 6.5 hours of brand new special features. Now, I'll admit, this film is not for everyone, and I would say, in terms of what we set out to make, we had run-ins with the studio that was actually appalled by how graphic and violent and how beyond the pale the movie was, so we had to really pull back on it. So it is what it is. I'm proud the movie got made. I really had fun going to Bulgaria to produce it. I spent 3 years of my life going through what was first the independent film route, and then I was able to flip it to a studio. So it was pretty great. And now, 11 years after it came out, we were able to create all new special features using footage that no one had ever seen before, that I shot on location in Sofia, Bulgaria, and I hope it's an enjoyable watch for everybody. But at the end of the day, it's all about content. Great content with great creators that people like. That's the secret to making money in Hollywood. And that's how people are going to watch Quibi. And I would say, cut your losses. Obviously, what you did, you can't make fetch happen, man. And they're trying to do that. They're trying to make fetch happen. Your premise was flawed. Give up on it. Turn yourself into a normal streaming service. Put yourself out. You've got some movies to start with. Get rid of the bite-sized notion of what a Quibi is, and take your movies that you chopped up, your 90-minute films that you chopped up into however many segments, and put them out as a single film. Do that. I mean, I would say make those hard choices. But okay, you beta tested, it didn't work. Go back in and start it out and make Quibi a regular streaming service. That's what I would suggest doing. But what do I know? You know what I do know? I do know about Star Trek. And this week, ladies and gentlemen, gentle beings, kind sirs, however you identify, whatever part of the 28 known galaxies you are from, you are imagination connoisseur from, you could be from a far out land. You're welcome here. This week was the 30th anniversary of the debut of the Best of Both Worlds, which is, of course, the third season cliffhanger to Star Trek: The Next Generation, which aired in June of 1990. My God. And let me tell you, what an exciting time that was. The third season of Star Trek: The Next Generation, they brought on Marvin Rush as the new DP, so the show looked different. Michael Piller came on board as head of the writing staff, and while this season 3, as Ira Stephen Bear will tell you on our documentary, on the Blu-ray of season 3 of The Best of Both Worlds that I produced along with Roger Lay Jr., he will tell you that season 3, by the time he arrived, was already in the toilet. The writing staff, the tumultuous first 2 seasons, left the writing staff in a state of it was a mess. However, despite all of that, season 3 is one of the strongest seasons of modern Star Trek. There is a number of wonderful episodes in the season. The new look, the show, the lighting, just look no further than yesterday's Enterprise, or episodes like The Enemy. There's some really great stuff going on in the show. And of course, they bring back the Maurice Hurley created adversaries that were introduced in the second season of Next Generation in the episode Q Who, which everybody loved, the Borg. And they reintroduced them. And they teased, even at the end of The Neutral Zone, which was the last episode of the first season, they teased the Borg without knowing really who and what they were, by saying that outposts have been disappearing, both Romulan and Federation outposts, and that's what sort of draw out. The Romulans hadn't been heard from in a while. It drew them out, and it was pretty fascinating. Now, Michael Piller didn't know if he was going to come back in the writing staff after the third season. So basically, he wrote an episode, the climax, which was an impossible climax. They didn't know Patrick Stewart. Would they bring him back? They didn't know yet. There's all kinds of things that were in flux about the show. and it all resulted in the best of both worlds, which is one of the most exciting hours of television, especially if you were a Star Trek fan, because the stakes were huge, the jeopardy was huge, and they left you in a position, spoiler alert, where Captain Picard had been abducted from the bridge of the Enterprise by the Borg, and he had been turned into one. He had been assimilated and turned into Locutus of Borg, who the Borg realized they needed a spokesperson to interface with humanity in order to make their resistance was futile. Apparently, the Borg were going to assimilate all of Earth, and they were going to make the transition easier by having Picard speak for them for the first time. And when you watch this, I mean, it was amazing because I'll never forget. I was obviously a huge Star Trek fan my whole life, and by the time the third season rolled around, there was some really great moments in the third season. There was an episode called "The Survivors" that I love that had it packed a huge wallop in the climax. Episodes like the Romulan episodes, "The Enemy" and "The Defector" were terrific episodes. Obviously, yesterday's Enterprise blew everybody away. I mean, Next Generation turned into some really heady stuff in the third season. So I would argue it wasn't just Best of Both Worlds. It was the entirety of the third season that cemented Next Generation into one of the great television shows of all time. But that cliffhanger, the thing about the cliffhanger was, it was going along. There had never been a Star Trek cliffhanger before. There was one 2-part episode in the first season of the original series, which was, of course, the Menagerie Parts 1 and 2. So people knew those episodes, but there was never a season-ending cliffhanger. And no one saw it coming. I remember watching the show thinking, wow, Locutus, that's crazy. How are they going to get to him? And then it leaves you hanging with that amazing climax where it looks like the Enterprise is going to use its deflector dish and destroy the Borg cube. And what, take out Locutus? Like destroy Captain Picard? What? And I'll never forget. I mean, you had Ron Jones's amazing score and that incredible piece of music. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, it was incredible. Fire, that was the shit. And even I think I was watching the episode. I might have been watching it by myself. And I remember my jaw just hit the floor, man. I'm like, oh my God. Well, today, in the Hollywood Reporter, there's an article, and I'm going to share it with you. And here it is. The article was written by Phil Perello, and it was published at 6 a.m. this morning, How the Best of Both Worlds Saved Star Trek. Now, I just want to say I disagree with that. I think the third season in its entirety is what saved Star Trek. 30 years ago this week, Next Generation made franchise history with its first cliffhanger. Blame the Borg for why Star Trek The Next Generation became what it is today. From 87 to 89, the voyages of Captain Picard and the crew of the Enterprise D struggled to be anything more than a passable background watch in its creatively turbulent first and second season. I just want to point out that Star Trek was not turbulent. It was a hit. It was very successful. Now, creatively, maybe not so much, but it did do very, very well, and it proved that hour-long dramatic syndication was a new viable format for TV. Before, hour-long syndication was game shows, and it was talk shows and things like that, but Next Generation changed the television paradigm forever, showing that hour-long syndicated dramatic television was viable. It also led to Paramount reviving things like The Untouchables and Mission Impossible. Just want to point that out. Season 2 is The Measure of a Man, and Q Who being the lone must-watch exceptions. I disagree. The Big Goodbye won a Peabody Award from the first season. Heart of Glory, 11001001. It's a fallacy that the first 2 seasons of Next Generation are missing great episodes. That's untrue. The latter episodes introduced the Borg, who would return in the 1990s game-changing third season finale, The Best of Both Worlds Part 1. The episode, which turns 30 this week, forever changed both the series and the franchise, becoming one of the greatest hours of television the genre has ever produced. Looking back on The Best of Both Worlds on its 30th anniversary, it's hard to imagine Star Trek without it, or anticipate the impact this landmark hour would have on the franchise's future. It's ironic that the series' most lethal enemy is responsible in part for saving it. Going into season 3, the Next Generation writers' room was a near constant and tumultuous game of musical chairs. The late TNG showrunner Michael Piller had the unenviable task of curbing that turnover and putting the series on a more stable ground. At the time, Piller's hire was a head-scratcher. He had no sci-fi experience, but a solid TV career on such crime shows as CBS's Cagney and Lacey. But in hindsight, Piller was the perfect fit. Season 3 is well regarded as the year Star Trek The Next Generation became, well, frickin' Star Trek The Next Generation. But it was a stressful and exhausting effort, by the end of which left Piller contemplating leaving the show. Rumors also circled that Patrick Stewart wasn't happy and had one foot out the airlock to leave the series too. Piller, as the story goes, wrote his personal experience into the fictional drama of the themes of the episode. He saddled Riker with a case of the should I stay or should I go when offered his third shot at taking command of a starship, just as the Borg returned to assimilate humanity. On their way to add Earth and its populace to their hive mind collective, the Borg take a human representative, Captain Picard. Now Riker is forced to take the very center seat he was afraid of, with his mission being to save Earth by potentially having to kill his captain and friend. The emotional stakes of Best of Both Worlds couldn't be higher or more compelling, hence why fans regard it as TNG's analog to Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan, which is ironic given that the 1982 sequel's similar role in saving the franchise. And 30 years later, like the best of Star Trek features, the season finale only gets better with age. Now, I agree with that, but there is a misconception that Star Trek the Motion Picture was some kind of a failure because people don't like it as much as they should. I love the film. It made a lot of money, and it was very successful. Now, they realized it was untenable that you can't make Star Trek movies for $45 million, but remember, there were the development costs of the Star Trek Planet of the Titans movie that was aborted, the development costs, and they were far into production or pre-production on the Star Trek Phase 2 television series. So there was millions and millions of dollars that were already against Star Trek the Motion Picture. And then when they were locked into their release date and they had to fire Robert Abel and Associates, the production was speeded up so they had to spend a lot more money. So what Paramount did was they brought in the television division headed up by Harv Bennett to make Star Trek using television methodology. But Star Trek the Motion Picture was successful. Star Trek 2 was made, and they did the right thing. They figured out how can we make it cheaper. So it wasn't like Star Trek after the motion picture was in danger of dying. They had launched all new product lines. Pocket Books was successful with their Star Trek books. So merchandising was there. So Star Trek was not necessarily in dire straits. But anyway, and when Michael Piller was brought aboard, what he did that was a fundamental change from the first two seasons of Next Generation was he came around and philosophically said, look, we're no longer going to tell stories about something out there coming into us. Every one of our stories has to begin with one of our central characters. Our central characters, we have to be telling a story about them first, and then we can move outward. And that was a genius. So he flipped the script literally about what kinds of stories and how they were being told. So there's a lot more going on than just the Best of Both Worlds. Anyway, the first cliffhanger in Trek history, June 1990's airing of The Best of Both Worlds, brought audiences to the edge of their couch cushions as Riker gave that iconic order to fire on Picard, a.k.a. Locutus of Borg, while the former Enterprise captain was aboard the Borg cube. A fade to black and one to be continued later made fans borderline obsessed with how it would all play out, with the months-long wait to the Season 4 premiere feeling nearly unbearable. When Next Gen returned to the fall with The Best of Both Worlds Part 2, First Officer Riker got promoted to captain and was given a chance to prove his mettle against Picard and work with his crew to save him and the galaxy. While the episode's tension falls short of the riveting Part 1 and has a two-pat conclusion, Data helps defeat the Borg by basically issuing a computer command to put them all to sleep. Part 2 puts a satisfying bow on this influential storyline. In fact, the ramifications of which are still being addressed 3 decades later in Star Trek Picard. Even the events of Best of Both Worlds would also inspire the best next-gen movie, First Contact. Not enough credit is given to the role the episode's thematic tentpoles play in its timeless success. Despite being set in the 24th century, The Best of Both Worlds connects with modern audiences thanks to the very relatable and universal emotional drama Riker grapples with. Sorry, I'm running out of steam here. Sorry for that. You don't have to have served on a starship to know what it's like to feel stuck or fear change. especially in regards to one's career, how sometimes we let it feel like it determines our worth. That's what Riker struggles with in both parts 1 and part 2, on top of feeling caught in the shadow of a great officer like Picard, as he literally must take on the man who taught him everything he knows. The episode also doesn't get much credit for how satisfying it wraps up the storyline for Riker. By radically accepting that an extra rank pip on his collar doesn't determine his status or worth, Riker makes the very emotionally honest realization that lets him have an arc, even though he's staying put on the Enterprise bridge. Pillar's script argues that one doesn't need to move on or change jobs to evolve personally within their profession. Ironically, Pillar would stay on the series as well, before leaving to help oversee Star Trek spin-offs Deep Space Nine and Voyager. The former wouldn't exist without the storyline established by Best of Both Worlds either. Prior to this installment, Picard and crew had yet to really come into their own or push the limits of Trek and creator Gene Roddenberry's often rigid storytelling, working within those constrictions and using the inner lives of its main characters to service an external conflict reinvigorated the series in a way that would fuel the franchise for 3 decades. And 30 years later, like Wrath of Khan before it, Best of Both Worlds only gets better with age. Again, I agree with everything he said here, but it was the entirety of Pillar's philosophy of and how the whole 3rd season worked that reinvigorated Star Trek and really started bringing in audiences to the show in droves. Star Trek: The Next Generation went out with all good things. Its 2-hour season finale or series finale. It went out with huge ratings, especially for 1-hour syndication, because of that. Because the show is about our characters first. And, other episodes of the 3rd season that were great. The Offspring, when Data creates Lal, his daughter. Another episode, which was also Jonathan Frakes' directorial debut. He's become a very, very accomplished film director and television director, still in demand today. He's directing episodes of Star Trek. So I would say that it wasn't just Best of Both Worlds. It was the entirety of the new philosophy of how you approach a Star Trek story, which first and foremost begins with our characters, which is something modern Star Trek could, I think, maybe learn from. But look, it's very exciting, and I just want to point out that there was a single disc movie-only version of the Best of Both Worlds when we were working on the Blu-rays. It was the first of 5 Blu-rays where they took 2-part episodes and cut them into a single program and released them on a Blu-ray, and we were able to do I was able to do another documentary, a half-hour documentary, and there's more bloopers, and it's kind of hard to find. I don't even know if you can get it on Amazon anymore, but that single Blu-ray does have special features that you can only get on that disc. There's an audio commentary, and what was really fun for me when I was working on Star Trek, it was the last of our theatrical events. So when they had created this 2-part, they'd made the 2-part episodes, they put them in together as one film, made like one 90-minute, because the episodes are 45 minutes without commercials, one long program. It had its world premiere at a Fathom event in 1,200 theaters across North America. So they made one-sheets for it, and I was able to do my documentaries that I was doing for Blu-ray. I cut them down, and they were shown in a theater too. So it was really exciting to take my DVD or Blu-ray special features for Next Gen and to see them on a theater screen. That had never happened before. So that, for me, it was great to see my work playing in movie theaters. So that was really, really, really exciting. So, and it was interesting story about Hollywood. Cliff Bowl, who directed those 2 episodes, complained to the DGA about his work being shown in movie theaters and wanted to get, here we had Cliff Bowl come back and do audio commentary, and we interviewed him and everything. And then he complained to the DGA when CBS and Paramount were doing these Fathom showings for charity. I think it was to raise money for the Red Cross. And it was, of course, to promote the Blu-ray releases, which he benefited from. And that's why there were only 3 Fathom events. We didn't do them for seasons 4, 5, 6, and 7 because Cliff Bowl complained. So it ain't show friends. It's show business, no matter what. But I think it's fun to look back and honor the Best of Both Worlds and remember how exciting it was at a time when Star Trek was incredibly riveting and great stuff, right? Wasn't it great? back in the day. I got letters, people. I got letters. So, yeah, I got letters. So let's start. Let's start with a letter today. Let's see what's up. This first letter comes from the Justin. The Justin, Justin. Justin. Hey, Rob, I hope you're well. The Justin here. Back again with another rambling rant. Due to more and more fans expressing their love for Predator 2, I wanted to throw my hat in the ring. Well, let's get a few things straight. The first Predator is awesome. It took the high-voltage explosions and machine guns of the 80s action film and spun it on its head, going from your average shoot-'em-up to a science fiction horror film in a matter of seconds. It's an unequivocal masterpiece, and I would be doing director John McTiernan a great disservice by not acknowledging his genius. However, Predator 2, in my eyes, has always been the superior film. What? For many reasons, but I will highlight only two. The first reason is the setting. While the Central American jungles of the first film are iconic, it's a tad disconnecting. Sure, the near infinite greenery and surgical tactics of the jungle hunter make for a paranoid experience, but I often find myself a passive viewer when watching it. Somewhat removed from the situation, after all, most have never been to the actual jungle, our knowledge of it only informed by movies like Predator. So while the film is exciting to watch, in my mind it was always something that could only happen over there. Predator 2, on the other hand, takes place only a few blocks over. I grew up in Chicago, a far cry from LA, but the LA in the film is more Chicago than LA ever was. The heat is sizzling off the street, police and civilian tension is at an all-time high, and gangs run the city. Yet in the midst of all of it, our biggest threat is the unseen force right above our apartment complex. It makes the city hunter Predator something even more mythical, because he operates where we sleep. He stalks subways. He crashes into our bathrooms. His roar echoes through the alleyways, and yet no one ever sees him. You don't have to go far in order to be in the red crosshairs of his shoulder cannon. Predator 2 proves that you can be badass in the comfort of your own living room, and he will still find you. While I could delve into the lore of Predator 2 and how it added more to the mythology of the franchise, none of that is really a big deal for me. The biggest deal, however, was seeing Danny Glover whoop the Predator's ass like a disappointed father. Yes, Dutch is awesome. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger at the height of his popularity. But isn't he just a walking tank? The whole point of Predator was to drop a monster movie in the middle of a G.I. Joe episode, and Dutch is the prime example of that. He shows little to no emotion until the very end, and even then it's more so determined frustration. Come on, kill me, I'm here, do it. Get to the chopper. Dutch is a can of catchphrases, a far cry from his much more iconic roles in Terminator and Twins. I'd even go so far to say that Dutch is a passive character in the film, and the events are happening to him. It isn't until the very end that he starts to drive the plot, and even then, just him standing his ground, which I get adds to the appeal for some people. Danny Glover's Harrigan, however, drives the story with his actions. He intervenes in a war between the Colombian and Jamaican drug lords, which leads to him seeing the Predator and ultimately pursues it. At every turn, Harrigan wrecks the Predator, severing his arm and eventually being the first and only human to kill a Predator on screen in hand-to-hand combat. He literally slices the Predator with his own weaponry. He didn't have prep time. He chased the Hish and killed it. And when confronted by a clan of predators surrounding him, he looks around, drops the smart disc, and says, well, who's next? Come on, son, don't act like you didn't get the chills. As a black kid growing up, an imagination connoisseur, I can't really express what it was like to see a powerful man of color lead a sci-fi action movie, predating the 90s Will Smith summer films. What's most impressive about the Thomas Brothers screenplay is that Harrigan could have been played by anybody. He just happened to be a black man, not falling into some strange tokenism or trope. It was nice to see Glover also get to play the cool, explosive character for once, because let's face it, while Murtaugh had the ideal life, Riggs was the most exciting to watch. In a way, Harrigan gave Glover the chance to be Riggs, or at least his own version of it. I know that won't mean a lot to the majority of viewers, but for me, it was huge. And it's some ways made up for both Dylan and Mac being killed in the jungle a few years earlier in the first film. Predator is single-handedly the reason why brothers don't go camping or on hikes. It's our deliverance. Signing off, the Justin. I love this letter. Well, the Justin, again, one of the things that I think are what we don't understand, what some people don't get, is how representation like this matters. And I agree with you. I mean, I really I'm a huge fan of Predator 2, and I have to tell you, one of I think the Predator 2 is a movie that there were two movies that Silver Pictures made that I feel were done a great disservice. One was Predator 2, and the other one was The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. And they were movies that were both each about a half an hour longer, that for some inexplicable reason, I don't know if this was a Joel Silver thing or a studio thing, the movies were edited down. And I saw cuts of both of those films, longer versions, and they were just better movies. Now, I'm not saying, like, look, in the process of movies being made, it happens. But both Predator 2 and The Adventures of Ford Fairlane are two movies that I like them both. And I was very disappointed to see Predator 2. There was a lot more character development, a lot more Danny Glover. And I know, they want to get right to the action and all of that, but they were better films. Now, I think Predator 2 was really well directed. It has that music video sheen to it. I know it's got that very 90s, sort of early 90s sheen to it that both Ford Fairlane and Predator 2 had, but I would love to see a longer version of that. I don't know if that's even possible, but it would be cool to go revisit that. But like you were saying about representation, I mean, I think I never thought of Predator as being deliverance for the brothers, as you put it. I never thought of that. Wow. Yeah, I mean, they killed Carl Weathers in Predator. Bill Duke. What the hell, man? Two men that should never be killed in a movie. Yeah, I totally understand that. But that's very interesting. I mean, again, a lot of people don't pay attention to how representation works, but like you're saying, true representation is something like what you described, Danny Glover's character. He could have been a white guy. He wasn't necessarily written as a black dude. But by the way, the same is true of Night of the Living Dead. The main character was not necessarily written to be black. And yet by allowing Danny Glover, and by the way, Danny Glover, not a young man, certainly not your traditional heartthrob, but by casting him in that role, you added an extra special sauce to that movie that made it resonate with you more than, say, it would have. And that's what's really cool. And I think when people are talking about representation, it's the kind of representation that you had in Predator 2 that isn't somebody going, look, we're casting, we're being diverse. We have diverse casting choices. If you have to explain that, the whole point of having diverse casting is sort of defeated. What's really ballsy is to just do it and not come out and go, look at how great we are because we cast. No. Just make it happen and then sit back and allow your work to speak for itself. I mean, I think that's cool. I loved your letter, man. Thanks. Keep writing in. Your letters are always great, very well written, very entertaining. Thank you for that. And you make great points. And I think that's what I love about reading the letters from people, because you guys are great. Is it Justin? Justin. Hey, Justin. Because it's just N-U, the way you spell it. It's J-U-S-T, capital M. I want to get that right because I like it. I like it. I'd buy that for $1. Torrin Atkinson is here. Hey, Rob. I was watching your live show yesterday, and someone commented that they, Wizards of the Coast, are making changes to Dungeons & Dragons. Your response was, they've gone too far. But allow me to contribute with some additional information. Please do. You assumed that they were taking orcs and drow out of the game. They are not. You can read the full press release, Diversity and Dungeons & Dragons here. And I will. Yes, I will, because that's what this show is all about. Ooh, this is a long press release, but I'm going to read it anyway. Okay, this was published on June 17th by Wizards of the Coast and their D&D team. It is called Diversity and Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons teaches that diversity is strength, for only a diverse group of adventurers can overcome the many challenges a D&D story presents. In that spirit, making D&D as a welcoming and inclusive as possible has moved to the forefront of our priorities over the last 6 years. We'd like to share with you what we've been doing and what we plan to do in the future to address legacy D&D content that does not reflect who we are today. We recognize that doing this isn't about getting to a place where we can rest on our laurels, but continuing to head in the right direction. We feel that being transparent about it is the best way to let our community help us to continue to calibrate our efforts. One of the explicit design goals in the 5th edition of D&D is to depict humanity in all of its beautiful diversity by depicting characters who represent an array of ethnicities, gender identities, sexual orientations, and beliefs. We want everyone to feel at home around the game table and to see positive reflections of themselves within our products. Human in D&D means everyone, not just fantasy versions of Northern Europeans. And the D&D community is now more diverse than it's ever been. Man, I gotta say, this is a pretty good statement. Throughout the 50-year history of D&D, some of the peoples in the game, orcs and drow being two of the prime examples, have been characterized as monstrous and evil, using descriptions that are painfully reminiscent of how real-world ethnic groups have been and continue to be denigrated. That's just not right. And it's not something we believe in. Despite our conscious efforts to the contrary, we have allowed some of these descriptions to reappear in the game. We recognize that to live our values, we have to do an even better job in handling these issues. If we make mistakes, our priority is to make things right. Here's what we're going to improve. We present orcs and drow in new light in 2 of our most recent books, Eberron, Rising from the Last War, and Explorer's Guide to Wildmount. Wildmount? In those books, orcs and drow are just as morally and culturally complex as other people. We will continue that approach for future books, portraying all the peoples in D&D in relatable ways and making it clear that they are as free as humans to decide who they are and what they do. When every D&D book is reprinted, we have an opportunity to correct errors that we or the broader D&D community discovered in that book. Each year, we use those opportunities to fix a variety of things, including errors in judgment. In recent reprintings of Tomb of Annihilation and Curse of Strahd, for example, we changed text that was racially insensitive. Those reprints have already been printed and will be available in the months ahead. We will continue this process, reviewing each book as it comes up for a reprint and fixing such errors where they are present. Later this year, we will release a product, not yet announced, that offers a way for a player to customize their character's origin, including the option to change the ability score increases that come from being an elf, a dwarf, or one of D&D's many other playable folk. This option emphasizes that each person in the game is an individual with capabilities of their own. The Curse of Strahd included a people known as the Vistani and featured the Vistani heroine Esmeralda. Regrettably, their depiction echoes some stereotypes associated with the Romani people in the real world. To rectify that, we've not only made changes to the Curse of Strahd, but in 2 upcoming books, we will also show, working with a Romani consultant, the Vistani in a way that doesn't rely on reductive tropes. We've received valuable insights from sensitivity readers on 2 of our recent books. We are incorporating sensitivity readers into our creative process, and we will continue to reach out to experts in the various fields to help us identify our blind spots. We're proactively seeking new, diverse talent to join our staff and our pool of freelance writers and artists. We've brought in contributors who reflect the beautiful diversity of the D&D community to work on books coming out in 2021. We're going to invest even more in this approach and add a broad range of new voices to the course of D&D storytelling. And we will continue to listen to you all. We've created the 5th edition in conversation with the D&D community. It's a conversation that continues to this day. This, at the heart of our work, listening to the community, learning what brings you joy, and doing everything we can to provide it in every one of our books. This part of our work will never end. We know that every day someone finds the courage to voice their truth, and we're here to listen. We're eternally grateful for the ongoing dialogue with the D&D community, and we look forward to improve D&D for generations to come. I like that. I think that's what a great statement. I mean, I hope they don't make it so like you can't kill orcs anymore. I mean, or brutalize brutalize evil sorcerers or whatever. I mean, the whole point is conflict and killing and broadening your power base. I mean, I hope they don't take away the essence of what D&D is, because I think in D&D you should have an equal opportunity of being able to kill whoever you want. Look, don't come after me. I'm being joking, but you know what? This is the kind of thing that I can get behind that. I think that's important. You want to make your game, your product, inviting to people, and I think falling back on look, if you want to make orcs more diverse and give them more personality and have orcs that maybe don't want to be orcs anymore, I'm all for that. Bring it on. You know, it sounds to me like you want to make villains uh, and characters make them more three dimensional. To me, that makes them better, probably a better experience to play against characters. Or if characters want to, if people want to be orcs, that sounds good to me. Now let me continue on with Torrens' letter. In a nutshell, from what I've been able to gather, they are doing a couple of things. Giving players more options for their characters, just like you can have good dragons and evil dragons. Just like you have good witches and evil witches, you can now have good orcs or drow and evil orcs or drow. Their actual quote is, orcs and drow are just as morally and culturally complex as other peoples, which I love. Additionally, they address their depiction of the Romani people. As you probably know, the word gypsy is a racial slur. I imagine, though I don't want to speak for them, it's their N-word or G-word. Folks who have been using the phrase "I got gypped" should probably know the origin of that phrase. The statement reads, "We will also show working with a Romani consultant, the Vistani, in a way that doesn't rely on reductive tropes." This all sounds good and fine to me. When I run games, I never use the alignment system, good, evil, neutral anyway, so revised depiction of orcs and drow won't have any effect on me. And with regards to the Romani depictions, bringing on a consultant seems to me to provide an opportunity for greater verisimilitude. Indeed. Many D&D fans are having a knee-jerk reaction, which is unfortunate. Like you say, fandom is its own greatest enemy. But on a personal level, I think these changes are well and good, and obviously any franchise will want to make itself accessible as to many diverse fans, potential customers as possible, which is totally understandable. I don't think these changes in any way dilutes the brand, and anyway, D&D has always had a long tradition of making homebrew rules. I think any dungeon master understands that the rulebooks are guides meant to be changed and broken for their home campaigns. What they don't actually address in the statement, but I expect they will at some point, is the use of race instead of the correct, in my opinion, word, species. Ooh, I totally agree with you. Elf, human, dwarf, etc. It doesn't make sense to me to use the word race, just like you wouldn't say that a zebra and donkey are different races of the equine family, not to get pedantic. Anyway, I expect they will at some point transition to folk or peoples, and again, the only players this will impact negatively are the old curmudgeons, and in the gaming community, we call them grognards? I didn't know that. I've never heard that word before. Grognards. That's an onomatopoeia. Grognard. You're a grognard. Who are resistant to the inevitable change that must come from a brand to flourish. Now, on a related note, Wizards of the Coast also removed a number of card art from the Magic the Gathering online database. Some of these were based on the card title, card description, or card art, again with the Romani. The fellow who was the art director for the set with some of the offending cards, this was the 90s, put up a very thoughtful statement and apology on Facebook. He wrote, "We were portraying a culture that few of us had real ties to, and that can be a venture fraught with potential for mistakes." I think that's a great way of putting it, and a warning for other creatives who want to publish their ideas into the world. Do your research. Go and get that Romani consultant to enrich your understanding of what you want to write, film, or whatever. Anyway, thought I would offer some additional information on the topic. It was only glossed over in your show. Knowledge is power, ignorance is dangerous. Remember to be Robservant and never Robstinate. Live long and Lala Cthulhu Ftagan, Torin. P.S. I would like to apologize for my use of the word grognard. I did not mean to infer that all grognards are curmudgeons who can't enjoy things. Some of my best friends are grognards, and perhaps, just perhaps, I am also a grognard. Hey man, Torn, I will embrace the title grognard for myself. Maybe I should say that in the beginning, along with Viceroy of Verisimilitude and Sommelier of Cinema, and and the grognard of something or other. Something. What a great letter. Thank you for writing in. I very much appreciate this. Again, a terrific letter. And that's why I love you guys. That's why I love you guys. This next one comes from Jordan Thomas. Rob, hope you're good today. First up, thanks for the regular shows. I've been listening while flicking between working on a model railway and making model aircraft during the lockdown. The bass player for my band and I have regressed to our 10-year-old selves, but seeing as we're in a band together, hopefully we won't lose too many cool points. We had some decent gigs lined up for this year too, so we have to cheer ourselves up somehow. So this is how we're doing it. First of all, Jordan, come on, bruh. You can't just call up or write me a letter and say that you're working on model railways and building model aircraft and not send pictures. For me, looking at pictures of model airplanes or model railways, this is like pornography for me. It gets me hot. Please send me pictures of your work. I'd love to see it. Anyway, or put it up on the website in the Imagination Connoisseur Gallery. For those of you who don't know, in the Burnettwork.net website, which is this show's website, there is an Imagination Connoisseur Gallery where if you're doing any kind of work, things you want to show, artwork, stories, pictures of your model airplanes or model railways, please put them up there, and they're for all to see and enjoy. Anyway, regarding your Prince versus Stevie Wonder debate. Okay, for those of you who don't know, longtime Imagination connoisseur Alexander Wilson yesterday asked the question, who has had the better career, Prince or Stevie Wonder? And that was a tough one. So that's what Jordan is referring to. Anyway, regarding your Prince versus Stevie Wonder debate, I'd come down heavily on the side of Prince, as I always had the feeling, given the way that he worked and produced his records, that Prince had the upper hand, being very much his own person. Again, referencing the video where he wipes the floor with the other guitarists, then just tosses his telly in the air and wanders off, leaving the rest of them to literally pick up the pieces. Stevie has always struck me as someone who has people around him, if you know what I mean. Mind you, that's not to take anything away from his talent. Just, I feel that Prince was the stronger of the two. Also, you got to give it up for Stevie Wonder, who persevered despite his disability. But being a Prince fan, keep on doing what you do. I'm sure you don't need me telling you that. It's great to hear intelligent commentary from someone who has a pedigree rather than just angry ranting about pop culture from some guy's front room. Much love from Kings Lynn, UK. Jordan Thomas. And Jordan, what a delightful letter. I thank you for that. But man, come on, send me in some porn. Send me in some model porn. I want to see model airplanes. I want to see model railroads. I love model railroads, man. I never got into it myself, but it's one of those things when I see people have incredible model railroad setups. One of the great joys on working on Superman Returns is the insane model railroad that they built for that. That Guy Dias, the production designer, created. Oh, my God. So send those pictures in. I want to see them. So, yeah. Omar94 is here. Hi, Rob. I wanted to write this letter to celebrate one of the most important films ever made, Jaws. June 20th. Is that today? It is today. Really? June 20th, 2020 marks the 45th anniversary of Jaws, as it was released on June 20th, 1975, becoming the first blockbuster forever changing cinema. Hang on, Omar. I trust you, but hang on. Well, it does say that, hang on a second. Wait. Well, what is this? It's saying something differently. Why is it saying this? I don't understand. Oh, here we go. I'm just checking. There's some conflicting information coming up. Why? What month is it? Wow, this is so weird. Yep, you are correct, sir. Not that I doubted you, but I wanted to be sure. I didn't know that. For those of you, yes, indeed, I didn't realize. No wonder they had this come out when it came out. The lovely Jaws Steelbook, the 4K Jaws Steelbook. Very exciting to get that. It looks fantastic, by the way. Okay. June 20th marks the 45th anniversary of Jaws, as it was released on June 20th, 1975, becoming the first blockbuster. I know you did a Robservations episode for anniversaries of 1990's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and 2000's Gladiator, and you and Elizabeth did a whining about movies for Jaws and The Empire Strikes Back as a celebration type thing for those movies. For me, I celebrate a movie anniversary by watching that movie on a special anniversary, so I will rewatch Jaws as a celebration. I do that with a lot of movies having special anniversaries, where I rewatch them on the anniversary date. I did that a few weeks ago for the Goonies' 35th anniversary on June 7th, and Empire Strikes Back on May 21st. I've been doing this for a few years now. I think it started back in 2017 for A New Hope's 40th anniversary and May 25th. I did that again in 2017 for E.T.'s 35th anniversary and on June 11th. I did the same thing in 2018 for the 30th anniversary of Who Framed Roger Rabbit on June 22nd, the 30th anniversary of Die Hard on June 15th, and Jurassic Park on June 11th. I will continue doing so as many beloved movies this year have special anniversaries like Toy Story 1, Home Alone 1, Ghost, Back to the Future, etc. I'm sure you and the viewers have your own ways of celebrating movies on special anniversaries. Thanks, and live long and prosper. What a delightful letter, Omar. I do. December 7th, 1979, a day that will live in infamy, and it's also the day that Star Trek the Motion Picture got released, so I can never miss that date. Let me jump over and see what people are saying over here in the live chat. What are you guys saying? I don't know, because I haven't read them yet, but I'm about to. So let me go back, and let's see. This one comes from Lancelot Narian, sends in a tip and says, here's one for fellow UK members of the Post-Geek Singularity. The cast of The Magnificent Seven were asked to do an aftershave commercial at Anfield, but only 6 of them turned up. Yul Brynner never wore cologne. I didn't know that. That's crazy. Calvin Bowles sends in a tip and says, last night I took my sons to the drive-in and saw Space Jam and Twister. The drive-in is the best for small children. Next week is going to be Empire Strikes Back and Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. If you need a big screen fix, you should try the drive-in. Man, I love that you're taking your kids to see Empire and Wrath of Khan at the drive-in. How awesome is that? You know what? Make a video of Braxton at the drive-in talking about his experience, maybe while it's happening or when right when, you know what? I mean, if he hasn't seen Empire, he probably has, but it'd be great to see. It's great. It'd be great to see that that reaction. You know what? I have to make a quick, believe it or not, I have to send somebody my address. Hang on, and let me do that. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt the live show. I'd love to see that. Willow says, the issue with Breakfast at Tiffany's isn't just the use of yellowface, but also that the character is a caricature. I'm not sure if having a Japanese actor would make it that much better. I will be showing my mom the movie since she likes Audrey Hepburn. Well, that would be interesting. You should have her do a reaction video for Breakfast at Tiffany's. Yeah, I mean, look. Obviously, that's one of the most egregious examples of yellowface and caricature of an Asian person ever in movie history. And it's bad. There's no two ways around it. It was bad then. But, again, the rest of the movie has a lot to say. So do we get rid of it? I don't think so. I think we just realize, let's not do that again. Willow goes on to say, would you feel differently if Jeanette Goldstein played a black or Asian character in Aliens? Scarlett Johansson got in hot water for wanting to play a trans person. Where do you think we should draw the line between what actors can and cannot portray? Well, Willow, again, with the great questions. Thank you very much for asking. Actors are actors. To expect them to be exactly the kind of people that they should be portraying exactly who they are, I think is silly and wrong. I don't think that is. I don't think that's correct. I don't think that people should do that. However, the question that you have to ask, at least that I would, as somebody, if I was going to direct a film and you're dealing with, I mean, unfortunately, that is assuming there is, hang on, this question. Oh, the problem that I have, back to what I was talking about, what you want is you want to create verisimilitude. You really do. So you have to believe, I think, that the actor that you hire can portray the person that is being portrayed in a way that adds to the effectiveness that creates verisimilitude in your film. So if you were to hire Jeanette Goldstein to play a black character, if she was going to be doing it in, I believe Jeanette Goldstein played Vasquez well. I mean, she was cast for the role, and by the way, she does have Brazilian blood in her. She has Brazilian in her background. But I think that I still believed Jeanette Goldstein in that role, and I loved her in that role. So I think it's okay. Now, I don't necessarily think that by saying, well, you're taking away a role from an actual, I guess, Latino actress or a Spanish actress or a Mexican actress or an Ecuadorian. I mean, I don't know maybe she was the best person the director thought for that particular role. And I thought she was great in the film. Again, your first impulse when you're making a movie is, can the actor that you've cast in the role portray that role the best? Now, Scarlett Johansson, there was a story that she was going to play a trans person. Well, here's the thing. You also have to justify how much money you're spending on the film. So is it better to make a film about a trans person where Scarlett Johansson is playing that person? Is it better to do that than it is to not make the movie at all? Because if you're going to tell, I think that story was a really interesting story. I read up on that story when this was all going down, and I'm like, I would like to have seen that movie. I would have enjoyed that film. Now it's not going to get made, probably. Are there this idea that there is a trans actress that is somehow both as good an actress as Scarlett Johansson and, more importantly, has the box office clout? Because remember, you can't just put anybody. Movies are a money-making enterprise, and you have to assume that when you're making a film that there are enough elements in there that people are going to go see it and make its money back. Now, I think that story could have, if that movie could have brought a lot, like Dallas Buyers Club, having Jared Leto, play the role that he played, winning his Academy Award. Was it better? I mean, he's not that way, but he played that character. Was it better to make that movie and put the spotlight on those issues or not? I think when you have Jeanette Goldstein playing a black or Asian character, I think that's a bridge too far. I think you need to get that. Also shatters verisimilitude. At least that's the way that I would see it. I mean, the fact of the matter is there are many wonderful black and Asian actors in the world, and not to take anything away from Jeanette Goldstein, but I just don't believe that Jeanette Goldstein would be the best person to play either a black person or an Asian person, because I know for a fact that there are black and Asian actors who would do a better job. So, but it is definitely a very tough question to answer, and it's something that people should be mindful of. The actors, first of all, the actors of the trans acting pool, the pool of trans actors that even exist in Hollywood, is very, very small. Actually, I know a trans woman who, she's delightful, and I'd actually cast her in a past project that did not actually end up happening, but I would cast her in any role. I would cast her as a woman in any role, not just if she wanted to knowingly play a trans person, that's fine, but I would cast her as a woman in a role because she's sexy and she's a great actress and she's talented and she's a woman. So, I mean, it's a tough, how do you thread that needle in this day and age? I don't know. I mean, I've always believed I'm a meritocratist. You know, when you're casting for a project, you want to get the best actor for the role. You don't want to compromise a part and give it to somebody less talented to serve some quotient. I mean, I'm looking for verisimilitude, what best tells the story, what best serves the tale that you're going to tell. And also, you have to appease the people that are giving you the money. So, tough question, though. Stubble McShave says, if you read my letter on stereotypes today, I realized that the example of women being the muscle isn't a good example of twisting stereotypes. They've done it so much now that it's become cliche. A better example would be the jock as the funny sidekick. Well, I'll throw that in, Stubble. The jock. Yeah, I mean, come on. One of my favorite examples of that is Angela Bassett in Strange Days. I would have made a movie about her. How did she become that way? I mean, one of my favorite female characters in a modern film is Angela Bassett's character in Strange. I love that character. I love her in that movie so much. Stubble McShave goes on and says, concerning your excellent glasses, here's an excerpt from Stephen Fry's sketch reading of The Letter, which you all should see. After what seemed like a cliche, iron bolts were drawn back, the portal swung open, and Count Dracula's manservant stood before me. Of all the hideously disfigured spectacles I've ever beheld, those perched on the end of the man's nose remained forever pasted into the album of my memory. Nathan Lip sends in a super chat and says, what is your favorite Prince album? Wow, that's a tough one. You know, I fell in love with Prince because of 1999, to be honest. And my favorite songs on 1999 are side 2 was split into two record set. I loved DMSR and Let's Pretend We're Married. And other songs on that album, Lady Cab Driver, All the Critics Love You in New York, and International Lover are favorites. Yeah, yes, I like Delirious in 1999 and Little Red Corvette. I do. But the other songs were. And then that 1999 led me back to For You, Prince, and Controversy. And Controversy is another album that I love. So by the time Purple Rain came out, I was a big Prince fan. And Purple Rain is an incredibly strong album. But I mean, my favorite Prince album, that is a really tough one because, you know, as you go forward, like the Symbol album, the Gold Experience, Sign of the Times, it's tough. I don't know if I can answer that. I really love Love Sexy, Anastasia, Talk to Me, Liberate My Mind. It's tough. That's a tough one, man. That is a really tough call. I mean, I like even Emancipation, which is not, it's a 3-disc set. It's not perfect. Crystal Ball, not perfect, but there's so many good songs. Like The Ride. If you got the time, I got the ride. I mean, that's on Crystal Ball. A lot of people are like, what? I'm a huge, I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on that. I don't know, Nathan. Now you got me contemplating. Anyway, Eric Gantz says, no need to quibble about the qualities of Quibi. It's unquestionably a quantifiable failure. Yeah, but I hope they pull it out. I hope Meg and Jeff, they figure out. I want to see him. I would love to see nothing more than the great Quibi comeback of 2018 or 2020. It's not 2018. I would love to see that. So Godspeed, Quibi. Let's hope they pull it out. Christopher Morgan sends in a tip. Oh, thank you, sir. Just sending some love. Well, Christopher Morgan, love right back to you, sir. Raging Raptor, my God, sent in a very generous super chat, Raging Raptor. That's very nice of you. Thank you to Rob and Elizabeth for the hours of respectful intellectual discourse you've given the community. I'm hard-pressed to find anyone else on YouTube so adept at balancing different viewpoints and leaving everyone better off for listening in. You know what? Thank you so much. I mean, that nothing makes me happier than hearing that. I mean, obviously, first of all, thank you so much for your generous support of the channel, but that's what this channel is supposed to be. You know, I mean, it's a place where I want everybody to be able to come and share viewpoints, and it's tough, man. Lately, threading that needle, trying to be respectful and also trying to have conversations about things and not I mean, I say it, I say what I believe, but sometimes it gets, it gets hard. Like Willow asking those very, very cogent questions. I mean, it's how do you talk about these things? Like I hope that we can talk about these things without somebody just flying off the handle and getting truly angry with me. But I think anybody knows that they can take me to task for anything that I say, and that as long as we we maintain an area. And again, I don't believe in safe spaces. I believe in places where people know and they can feel safe uh, having different points of view. But that's not, I wouldn't consider that a safe space. I don't think any kind of intellectual discourse should ever be safe. What it should be is a place that you come to that has rules that is governed by, first and foremost, respect, and the idea that when you come here, you can say what you want as long as the way you're saying it and the way you're presenting it is respectful to everybody else that's part of the community, and then we discuss it. And that's what I think is so, it's missing. Everybody wants to like scream and yell and just like everyone's so quick to cancel and yell, and that's not helpful. But I really appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad you mentioned Elizabeth, because it's been a lot of fun doing these shows with her. I didn't know how it was going to go. We did our 41st Whining About Movies last night on Gone Girl, and just so you know, for those of you who might not watch the show, next week is Sci-Fi Week. It's going to be funny. We're doing Steven Spielberg's AI on Monday. We're doing Alex Garland's Ex Machina on Wednesday. And for Romantic Friday, Elizabeth, and she said, viewers suggested it, we're doing Passengers, which certainly should be a controversial show. So that's what we're doing next Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So, wow. So, Raging Raptor, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much. I very much appreciate that. Hassan says, hola, mi gring. Have you met the love of your life? How do you keep the love of your life interested? Does true love exist? But most importantly, what shows have you seen on Quibi? Hassan, one, I've not watched any shows on Quibi, but I'm going to change that. Have you met the love of your life? I think so. How do you keep the love of your life interested? Oral. No, that's not. Look, I think that how do you keep the love of your life interested? I think that how do you keep anybody interested? You keep a relationship alive by being interested in what your partner is interested in, being interested in them, supporting them, finding delight in their successes. When they succeed, you're happy for them and you celebrate that success. And you do things together, and you enjoy things together. And I guess, and I think true love does exist. I mean, I think it does. Again, it means different things to different people, but I think, yeah, I think it does exist. I absolutely think so. But I don't know, man. Do I really have to sign up for Quibi? I guess I should. I mean, I don't doubt that there's good programming on Quibi. As a matter of fact, that suspense show, that sounds pretty good to me, but it's just the philosophy behind it, I think is not good. Supreme Joseph sends in a super chat and says, do you think Secret Wars could work in the MCU? Yeah, I do. But look, I think that one of the problems with Secret Wars is that you have this character, the Beyonder. And maybe James Gunn could make the Beyonder work somehow. I don't know. Maybe. It'd be interesting, but I would like to see that happen. I think it could be pretty interesting. I like Secret Wars. Damo Davies sends in a tip and says, greetings from the United Kingdom. I don't know what it is, but the third season of most shows is my favorite. This is true of Angel, Buffy, X-Files, Star Trek The Next Generation, Scrubs, and Friends, to name a few. I loved Yesterday's Enterprise from season 3 of TNG. Well, I think maybe it's because, especially now, the third season of a show is when they figured out what it is. And they've got the writing staff has calmed down, and they really know what that show is. And the actors know, the writing staff knows, the showrunner certainly knows, and it's firing on all it's firing from all areas. So that's probably why. Cardinal Sin sends in a super chat and says, R&B, are you an affiliate? Can I buy the film from you and get it autographed? I am not an affiliate. I'm happy to autograph a disc for you if you would like. I could probably get, if you're talking about Hills Run Red or something, and I could get Dave Parker to sign it as well. So, yeah, but I'm not an affiliate. Like an Amazon affiliate, I'm not. So, Damo Davies goes on and says, quick question. Who do you think would win in one of these military team events? Ripley and her Marines from Aliens or Dutch and his squad from the original Predator? My money is on Ripley's crew, but your mileage may vary. Wow. That, you know what? I'm going to give the edge to the Space Marines in Aliens, because I think as a team, as a unit, they have more experience working together in more varied conditions, I would imagine. And I think they would just know more tactically about different environments, different terrains. It'd be interesting though. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna go with the crew of the Sulaco. I feel terrible. You know, Bill Duke and Carl Weathers and Arnold Schwarzenegger are a formidable team, but I'm gonna have to take the team from the Sulaco, the aliens, the Space Marines. Jeff Yerke sends in a super chat and says, Rob, Miss Y and I love that, Miss Y and I are continuing our rewatch of TNG, and one very cool thing is Pillar's open script policy, which led in Ron Moore amongst others. Yes, for the bonding. He wrote the bonding. Season 3 kicks the hell out of Season 2. It absolutely does. Season 3 is amazing. There's so many amazing episodes in Season 3. I completely agree with you, and I'm glad you are correct. I agree. Mark C is here. Mike C sent in a super chat and says, I just remembered watching Predator 2 with Glover and Busey and asked, where's Riggs? I know, right? The dead presidents are surfers. So, yes, that's very funny. Stubble McShave says, great letter by Justin. When he mentioned Murtaugh and Riggs and Lethal Weapon, I wondered, could it have worked to have the roles changed with a white family man and an African-American madman? By the way, was Murtaugh considered to be good representation? That's a really good question. I would assume, that it is, because one of the things I really like about Murtaugh is first of all, his family, Darlene Love. I mean, I love the family. And let's face it, Murtaugh's daughter grew up I'm an old man now, but Lethal Weapon was 87? I could say that. She was hot. She was smoking hot. And as she went through the movies, she got even hotter. But I liked that family representation. I thought it was good. And, again, it flips the script. I think it just makes it, it makes it more interesting. I thought it was, again, to see a functioning nuclear black family that loves one another, that I thought, again, as far as representation is concerned, I think that was great. I think if you flipped the script and made the black dude the crazy guy, it might have been a little cliche. I thought flipping the script was good. I thought it was good. Alexander Wilson is here. A lot of the backlash for ScarJo trans casting came from the trans actor community. Trans actor Trace Lysette said people wouldn't be upset if I was getting in the same rooms as Jennifer Lawrence and ScarJo for cis roles, but we know that's not the case. Yeah, well, I mean, again, look, I think when it comes down to it's a good point there, but when it comes to actors in movies, you got to have the bankability. You have to have an actor that's going to be able to, that people know that are going to roll out and see. And one day there is going to be a trans actor that's going to have bankability, that's going to have the kind of, that can open a movie. But even motion pictures now, there's a handful, there's like 5 or 10 actresses on the planet Earth that studios want to star in movies. On the planet Earth. So it goes beyond, I mean, it's tough, but that's, I think that's, and even trans actors. I mean, I understand that the thing is, though, do you get a role because you're trans, or do you get a role because you're a good actor, or both? I mean, it's a question. I mean, it is a lingering question. Um, it's it's a tough one, and it is something that is definitely to be considered. Mark C sends in a super chat and says, "Oh my God, if the MCU does the Beyonder, they totally need to get David Hasselhoff to wear a Thriller jacket and play the role." Okay, I have to tell you, James Gunn could pull that off. For those of you who don't know, the Beyonder is basically this omnipotent godlike character that steals all the heroes and villains from the Marvel universe and puts them on a place, a planet, we'll call it War World, whatever, and to do battle. It's very much a riff. I always thought it was a riff on the third season original Star Trek series episode, the Gamesters of, or not the the Savage Curtain. It's very much like that. It's like the Savage Curtain, but with a lot more people on it. And and the Beyonder is this crazy character who makes it all possible, who in Secret Wars 2 dresses up in the most ultimate 80s outfit ever and comes to Earth. But David Hasselhoff is the Beyonder. I could see that, actually. I like that. Zachary King sends in a tip and says, regarding Jeanette Goldstein, Aliens was actually her first acting job, and she won a Saturn Award for supporting actress. She played John Connor's foster mom in T2. She played a science officer in Star Trek Generations, and she's the voice of the computer in Short Treks. Yeah, she's no slouch, and I'm sure that James Cameron cast her because he found her to be a great actress. And yeah, I'm with you 100% there. 100%. Let's see. David Lutz is here. Thank you, Rob, and thank you for keeping this channel running like a well-oiled machine and for fostering such a welcoming, positive, and inclusive community. Now on to my rant about censorship. Writing for the first time writing during an episode in response to the warning for Aliens. I cannot believe the level of those safeguarding measures for potential viewers of a particular movie. Not only does the language in the stated warning immediately influence the viewer to be consciously or unknowingly look for things to be offended or feel offense to, it devalues personal autonomy and responsibility to make up one's own mind. The warning itself presupposes that the viewer is incapable of determining on their own that a movie made in 1986 would depict issues, cultural sensitivities, and attitudes which may not fall in line with today's current social sensitive climate. I'm simply dumbfounded. Is it not common sense that a movie released in 1986 or any particular era will more often than not demonstrate language, cultural, and social paradigms considered acceptable in its given time? This infantilization is extremely bizarre to me. Do people not have the capacity to think for themselves and make a determination of what films or art is acceptable or conversely offensive? And who are the high and mighty public servants at the helm of this reactionary censorship? Why do they think they know what's best for everyone? They don't. And this dangerous trend is starting to get out of control. Well, David, I agree with you. And here's my thing. Who's making these decisions? And you know, normalizing this idea that we need to be told how to think about certain things. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's Arcturian, baby. I mean, you could say that kind of an attitude, like you're dealing with the military that are going into potentially life-threatening situations, and that's their job. They have certain senses of humor. They have body things to say, and they do razz one another about all kinds of things that are deemed politically incorrect. I think people would understand that in the context of the movie. And I this idea that, yeah, I want to know who is high and mighty, who is making these decisions. And the infantilization of all of us. Look, as I said, I believe in a well-educated, healthy population. Why our country does not make that the number one priority of our land, that we have highly educated and healthy people. And that means that we have to pull people up out of poverty. We have to get rid of income inequality. All of these things that we're talking about, they have their roots back in that arena. And what we want is, you want people, you want diversity, you want representation. You make people as educated as they can be. You let them, if they have a voice, they get to say it and speak out in their best voice. And that's what we should be doing. I mean, wouldn't it be great if we spent a lot of money on teachers and healthcare, and maybe not so much on military spending. I don't know. And I think that it's really getting dangerous that we're eliminating discourse, and we're trying to tell people, like, you need to think this way. Remember, this is offensive. It's not offensive to me. Like, and I because I am a astute viewer of these things. I don't need somebody to come in, and I find it offensive that somebody's trying to tell me what I should and shouldn't think about certain things, especially about art. This art, I mean, Hitler got rid of degenerate art. Not cool. Not cool. R&B on the topic. Oh, this comes from William La Rochelle. R&B on the topic of movie canceling. A title has been popping up in conversation for about half a decade. I hesitate to name it and put a target on its back. I don't know how to protect it. One of my favorite movies. Let's say that it's a genre hybrid and it has a whimsical and quirky style with a breezy pace. My argument is that someone seeing it for the first time could have his or her experience tainted if they've been given a trigger warning about a third-act traumatic event perpetrated by a certain bully against the hero's mother. If the attempted crime is named in a trigger warning off the top, the new audience may be braced for something horrible. They may even judge the early scenes and most of the movie for being insensitive because they are pleasant and don't seem to evoke the tone one expects from a movie that we are told leads to this dreaded event. Are you talking about Bambi? Could be. No doubt I've encouraged people who prioritize protecting people from triggering. As serious as that may be for individuals, anyone going to a movie should have an understanding that movies are intended to move people and even unsettle them. I think you're talking about Bambi. I think you are. I remember being shocked at the ending of The Hitcher and still kind of hate the makers of that film. Ooh, I love that movie. The same actress, Jennifer Jason Leigh, had a pretty shocking final scene in Last Exit to Brooklyn, but I have no opinion of dark moments in films that are a vision of hell to begin with. You are right that there is a taint to a movie like Aliens that will distract viewers, like it becomes a game of find the offense, or it creates a warped lens through which we are forced to question what is problematic according to whatever random employee decides to court slacktivists on Twitter by rating or cautioning a movie. See, my problem is everyone's like, what do you care, Rob? It's how it begins. Once we normalize the fact that people are starting to tell us how we should and shouldn't feel about something, what we should, it's therein lies. I mean, this is what scares me about my own presumably liberal left side. Man, it's remember what we saw in the 20th century over and over and over and over and over again. And it's just terrifying. I'll name a movie that may not be in danger but could be. Inner Space is an underrated and always fun watch. One of the plot turning points later in the film is a great visual reveal that lets Tuck realize not only where he is, but also that his personal life is likely going to change. Even in the 80s, I thought this visual was surprising considering some of the politically charged climate of Hollywood, but I think today that spoiler would be all over the YouTube community and think pieces would be warning how dangerous it is to humanize or sentimentalize a certain phase of human life. I know what you're referring to. There might also be people on the other end of the political spectrum who are sounding the alarm over a joke about a cyborg who can replace his cosmetic hand with a vibrator. Not that the movie is about that. Someone could argue that the ghost B.J. Ray gets in Ghostbusters might be a note of Stripes-era mischief that might make a parent uncomfortable. That might be fair, but I don't think that the implication would stop the movie cold. When people flag Forrest Gump for his conflict with the protester, I find that the last time I watched it, the radical who was dating Jenny resonated as a type that I have encountered, especially online. The line where he says, "It's just that Nixon is the excuse for his losing control," made me laugh in recognition. He's using protest as part of roping in Jenny as a girlfriend. It is more about his own power and less and status than having an impact on Vietnam. I know, that's why these discussions are not so simple. Everybody wants to reduce these things down to sound bites, and there's some craziness going on. Craziness. And I think you're right. I think you're right. It leads to a bad place. William La Rochelle goes on. With all the talk about Confederates and the official enforced stance that each person who fought for the South was doing so only thinking of slavery, I think about the hysteria that greeted the publication of Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird sequel, Go Set a Watchman. The controversy being that it is ultimately about getting to know someone truly as a human being. grown-up Scout questioning her perfect view of her dad, Atticus Finch, as opposed to having them trapped in amber, as Carrie Fisher would say. I had my hand on the novel but found the audiobook read by Reese Witherspoon and opted for that. It was quite engaging, and her performance helped set off any prejudice I might have brought to it. Scout goes to visit the black lady that used to keep house for the Finches and sense that things are off with a new context as she has to adapt to the reality of her as an individual. She also has to reconcile her father having met with someone with loyal Confederate leanings that Scout finds shocking as a liberal herself. The whole book is leading up to the moment she will loop home and have an anticipated confrontation with her father. So Ghost Set a Watchman is not trying to replicate the easily embraced conflicts of To Kill a Mockingbird. It is not far from my thoughts when someone says matter-of-factly that the South were, in their hearts consciously, all about the finances enjoyed from slavery. In the abstract, their leaders would have spun it differently, that they did not want to be under the heel of the North and generally lord it over. We've seen in more recent years how people can get caught up in propaganda, even in more educated times, the Iraq War, etc. Some of the groupthink we get today that leaves little room for, as you say, nuance. Just throwing out perspective for what it's worth. William La Rochelle, Toronto. Well, thanks, William. I mean, I agree with you, and all of these conversations are absolutely worth having. Stubble McShave is back again. Hi, Rob. I wanted to bring up two loosely connected subjects. The first is stereotypes and how it's used in the media. The second is warning labels and disclaimers that's being put on some movies and where this may lead. Concerning stereotypes. Stereotypes are connected to the old saying, show versus tell in storytelling. One should preferably always show a person's character through their actions rather than tell the audience about it. The problem with that is that it takes screen time to page count depending on your media to show things. Sometimes you don't have the luxury of being able to set up a secondary or tertiary character with actions that explain their personality. That's why storytellers sometimes fall back on stereotypes. By describing someone's appearance, as we an audience may, by our collecting understanding of certain stereotypes, draw conclusions about their character, and the storyteller won't have to spend the time of conveying a three-dimensional character to the audience. We all know these stereotypes based on appearance. Weasel-looking fellows are untrustworthy. Asian-looking people are good at math and or martial arts. Italians are corrupt and probably in some form of organized crime, and so on. In many cases, there's very little truth to this, but it's become a shorthand for giving a character certain attributes at a glance. So there's a reason for using stereotypes in storytelling, but you have to know which ones are okay to use. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, this shifts over time. What is deemed okay to use as a stereotype today, say a Weasley-looking fellow to indicate a shifty individual, may not be okay in 5 years' time. All groups of people that are connected to stereotypes are filled with individuals, where some may very well fulfill the characteristics of the stereotypes, but where many do not. You can understand why people dislike the use of stereotypes for their appearance, especially when there are negative associations with it, but even when there are positive associations, people may react negatively. For example, Asians have the positive associations at being good at things, but they don't want to be boxed into a stereotype that shows them being good at these things and then not see them as individual characters. I'm sure there are a lot of Asian-looking people that have lousy coordination, which would make them bad at martial arts, and they're probably bad at algebra too. They probably also have many fascinating subjects to their character that's never explored when they're being seen as a stereotype. It's not that simple, and all stereotypes are inherently bad for all situations. I think that Steve Buscemi has a lot to thank for the stereotype of Weasley-looking people being shifty for his career. As an aspiring storyteller, it's fun to use stereotypes and turn them on their heads. Show that the Weasley-type fellow is actually an upstanding citizen. Let the Asian-looking guy be the romantic lead, and let the female sidekick be the muscle of the story. Maybe she's the martial arts expert instead of him. Anyway, enough the stereotypes issue. Let's just talk a little bit about recent trends of putting warnings and disclaimers on movies. I agree with much of what you've said about these things. Let's start out by saying that I think it would be good ideas to have a short message at the start of Gone with the Wind that says, this movie contains some views on the relationship between slaves and slave owners that misrepresents history. Click on this link to see an in-depth discussion on this subject. I think there may be a few other movies that would benefit from such a disclaimer. That said, I don't think we should go through our collective movie library in search of every little thing that would seem offensive to any group of people. I also don't think this should be done arbitrarily by Netflix or HBO Max or any other media outlet. For me, I see two different paths that I would accept for putting such disclaimers in front of movies. especially if it's a sensitive thing such as racism. The first is that the studio that owns the movie says that it would be suitable with such a message at the top of the film. The second is that someone who finds an issue problematic can send it in to review to some established board that decides such things. During the review, the studio that owns the film would be able to argue what they think is the right course of action. It could be a group of historians and people. I think that would be interesting, like a ratings board. I see a small problem with the second alternative in that it has to do with social media. I think there's a big chance that if a movie is sent to a board because of a possible racist connotation and the studio argues that it shouldn't have a racist disclaimer, then the studio could very well be accused on social media of being racist, and that would stifle the process going forward. So that's my thoughts on the matter. So, Rob, do you think that we'll get to the point that a movie like The Godfather will get a disclaimer at the start because of its depiction of Italian Americans? Oh, I 100% do. I 100% think that The Godfather will end up having a disclaimer, which, by the way, is ridiculous because some of that movie is even about that, especially in Godfather 2. But 2, The Godfather is not necessarily portraying Italian Americans in a realistic fashion. As Coppola said, The Godfather is allegorical about a king and his 3 sons. It's about the succession of power. It's about so much more than just the Italian American community. It goes beyond that. But I'm sure that we're not very far away from that. There will be some kind of a disclaimer. Thanks, Stubble. I didn't put things in the issue of black people in America and their stereotypes because as a foreigner, I don't think that I have enough of an understanding of the issues at hand to talk about it in a certain way. Well, thank you for that, Stubble. Again, all of these letters are very, very good. Very, very good. Let's see. Wow, there's a bunch of people writing in. Mark C. sends in a super chat and says, I put it in the letter, but the Constitution gives up the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You are not promised a lack of offense of guaranteed that happiness. I agree. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You're absolutely right. And now we act like everybody deserves happiness, which no one gets that. You just don't get that. There's no guarantees. So I think that's very good. Jeanette Goldstein now runs a bra company for large-breasted women. I had to bring the perv factor, says Dancing Dog. Yes, I have looked at her stuff. She sells great material. I've never gone into her store, but yes, Jeanette Goldstein now has a ladies' unmentionable line, which is delightful. Laser Beam Hawkins sent in a super chat and says, actors playing other ethnicities and genders can be great. The Wayans playing in White Chicks, Robert Downey Jr. in Tropic Thunder, Kate Blanchett in I'm Not There. Big love, Rob. Yeah, man. I mean, look, Robert Downey Jr. playing a black character in Tropic Thunder is hilarious. People are now telling me that movie's going to get canceled. I'm like, what? The whole point of that is to address these very issues. Dancing Dog says, Rob, cigarettes and alcohol have warnings on their labels. A movie with a warning simply has a warning. It doesn't mean it's going to be gone or censored. I'm sorry, but I don't understand the fuss. Here's the thing. You're right, but it's a slippery slope because now everything is going to come up with some kind of a warning. And I think we adults, we don't need warnings to discern what is right and wrong. And stories, by the way, are dealing with all those things all the time. You know, human life. It's tough. Alexander Wilson, hang on. Hassan says, I wonder if John Lithgow will have to apologize someday for playing Roberto Muldoon. I worship actors and actresses who can play a wide variety of characters. Natalie Dormer is playing Pachuca in Penny Dreadful. The show's a mess, but I enjoy it. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, John Lithgow is playing actually a post-op transsexual in The World According to Garp and was fantastic in the role. Are you going to go back and take away? I would say that I think his character, who was such a loving, caring character, and I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. I'd love to read. You know what? I'm going to go look and see if I can find a trans person writing about that portrayal specifically, and I'll put it on tomorrow's show. Alexander Wilson sends in a tip and says, Don Cheadle said, diversity is about who gets to say yes to something, not the people being said yes to. Also, he said he couldn't get funding for his Miles Davis biopic because it didn't have a white character. That's a huge problem in Hollywood. Yeah, and you know what? I would love to have seen that movie. Miles Davis is a hero of mine. But you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. And, if Clint Eastwood, if a white guy wants to make Bird, he can get the financing. But Don Cheadle, not so much. And that's a problem. That's a real problem, and that's the case. And frankly, I think a Miles Davis biopic would be incredible. Austin Hernandez, Austin is here. He says, I think everyone that has hate in their heart needs a fucking hug. And should be forced to watch Next Generation to see how we all could be if we work together. Well, Augie, that is fantastic. I totally agree with you there. Dancing Dog sends in a tip and says, Rob, I know a lot of folks hated HBO's Watchmen because it highlighted the Tulsa Massacre. Too political, they called it. It's almost like they want to erase the history they don't agree with, yet they get angry when statues are taken down. Oy. Look, man, I thought the Watchmen's racial politics were a little muddled, especially in their portrayal of a smart Asian woman, who I loved, who should have been the hero of the show in my mind. But I thought look, despite my objections to certain parts of Watchmen, it is a wildly inventive show that is definitely a high watermark in all of genre television. I mean, it's pretty amazing storytelling. I couldn't believe when I was watching. I'm like, oh my god! And that was it, episode 6 when you find out Hooded Justice's origin. Incredible stuff. It's amazing television. Not for everybody, but amazing television. Anonymous says, one of the big problems that trans actors don't get the opportunity to be is in consideration for that ScarJo role. That is what people are upset about. Also, Rosa Salazar starred in Alita, but she isn't a draw, so that didn't matter in her casting. Well, that's true. And I agree with you. But if you're making a film, if the only way it's going to be financed is if there's a star of a certain level, otherwise it's not going to get made, well, then is it better that we live in a world without that film, without that story being told, or is it better that the story gets told? I mean, now we're not getting that movie because there is no bankable trans actor now that somebody's going to spend millions of dollars on, and it's not because they're trans, it's because they have to be a bankable actor, that an investor who's putting in $5 or $10 million into a project can be assured that they're going to get their money back, which is... And I think that's something that's not understood a lot about this stuff, is that it's not as if there was actors that weren't going to get those roles. It's you can only put somebody, especially in that kind of subject matter. And as I said, one day there is going to be a box office draw, a top 5 box office draw in the world actor who's trans. It'll happen. And when that happens, maybe that story can be told then. But, and it will. It will happen, just like when Hattie McDaniel won the Academy Award, the first black actor to win the Academy Award for Gone with the Wind. Nowadays, Denzel Washington is a box office draw across the planet. The world changes, and it will change. It'll eventually change. We're just in a period of time where it hasn't changed enough yet. And, as more and more trans people are realizing they have these kinds of opportunities, you're going to see more people get into the fray. They're going to jump into the fray. They're going to become actors. They're going to be in movies. We're going to see more of that. You're going to see more representation. And that's just the natural evolution of things. And while everybody wants that, it's the time we're living through, everybody wants it to happen now. But it's a process. Look at how far same-sex marriage has come in 20 years. I mean, that's why you should look at these things, and it's pretty amazing how representation can change so quickly. And we're on the right path. We are on the right path. I know everybody wants it now, but it is an evolutionary process, and it's happening very fast. And we should be fortunate that we're living in a time where that's true. I mean, can you imagine the stagnant, you talk about race relations for 1,000 years, what we dealt with for most of human history, and look at how quickly it's changing now. That's why I'm optimistic. We're living in pretty great times. Dancing Dog goes on to say, FYI, when The Godfather aired on network television in 1977, it appeared with a disclaimer. Wow, see? Please Google it. There you go. I didn't know that. Calvin Bose sends in a tip and says, Gone with the Wind is one of my all-time favorite films. I've always made a point to see it on the screen every time it was released since I was 10. My big fear because of protests, I will never get to see it in a theater again. I don't know. I think, I think maybe Gone with the Wind is going to be a great point of discussion. I think maybe people will be showing it and more, and they'll be having discussions afterwards. Because it is a stunning achievement in filmmaking. From a filmmaking perspective and from a story, melodrama and romance, and really, it is really, at the end of the day, the story of Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara. Everything else is surrounding that story. The core story of that is it's the destruction of the Southern way of life, but it is about Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. Well, everyone, I have to jump off the show now. I've got somebody I'm meeting who's coming over here, and I've got to go see them. Still have many letters. I've got a great letter from Jeffrey Mao to read. I've got a great letter from Mark C. to read. I've got another letter from Ian Samuels to read, which I will be reading tomorrow for Father's Day. I will be back tomorrow. But I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode number 447. What a great show today. I want to thank everybody for the support of the channel, the generous support of the channel. Fantastic. Thank you there. I want to thank everybody for a bumper crop, like they said in Never Let Me Go, a bumper crop of letters today. The discourse that you guys are bringing to the channel, it's very, very heartening, and it's very, I can't thank you enough for it, and keep them coming. I mean, this is what this channel is all about, is sharing our ideas and talking about them. And you guys and girls and gentle beings and however you identify, the stuff that you're sending me in is gold. And I'm glad we have a place and a forum to share it all. So keep that up. If you want to send me letters or videos, remember, you can make videos where you can talk. I will play them on the channel. Go to the Burnettwork.net website. You can send them to me there. And with that, I'm going to say, as you all know, every person you meet has a story to tell that you need to listen to. What do I say? Every person you meet has a story to tell you haven't heard yet. All you have to do is listen. That is the mission statement of this channel. And I also want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Haynock. I want to thank Jordy Lyons. I want to thank The Richard. And The Richard always has something going on. The Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page, watch parties, what have you. They're going on all the time. Also, you can go to the Whining About Movies Facebook page. And next week, Sci-Fi Week, with kind of a common theme. We're watching AI on Monday. We're watching Ex Machina on Wednesday. And Passengers for Romantic Friday. And that was something Elizabeth came up with, and so did the viewers. So thank you for that. I'm Robert Meyer Burnett, your host, and I'm bringing an end to Robservations episode number 447. My God, I'll be back tomorrow. And also for those, John Campea is putting the John Campea show on hiatus for a couple weeks, so I won't be on that show. So I will. The only way you can find me is here, and I look forward to seeing you here. Maybe we'll do longer shows, or I'll do multiple shows. I don't know. If you have any ideas, tell me. But here comes the end of Robservations 447. Thank you again for all the support. And as always, have a better day. And I'm having a better day because you guys make this show. This is a really good show.